Hello and welcome. I am your host of What Are You Reading? What Are You Writing? Author Karen E. Osborne. I have five novels out. The latest is Justice for Emerson. I am so glad that you're here. This is a space for readers and writers to come together and talk about books. So, as you all know, I do a show every week and sometimes two in a week. And so I can't read every book of every author that I interview. But I am so happy to introduce you to an author who I did read her entire book and I did love it. So I want you to welcome S.M. Stevens. Hey, Sue.
Hello.
So she is. She just wrote this beautiful book, Beautiful and Terrible Things. Isn't that a cool title? And here's what I said about it. Beautiful and Terrible Things is a brave, emotional book, and S.M. Stevens is a fearless writer, tackling important social issues wrapped in an engrossing story. The diverse characters are complex, layered people. Friendship, betrayal, race, identity, depression, and hope, all woven into a gripping and very human tale. This story, Charlie, and the cast of characters will stay with you long after you reach the end. So now I've got you intrigued, I hope. So we might start to, because you told me that you had a kind of interesting story about how you started writing fiction.
Mm,
And so I thought maybe you could share that with us.
Sure. This is not the recommended way to start a new career, but it worked for me. I had been a career-long business writer and always wanted to try fiction, but never had the time. And then I had a couple of health crises. I broke my pelvis, actually shattered it in multiple places, and couldn't do anything. I couldn't even drive my kids to their activities for 3 solid months. So I thought I was going to lose my mind. And so I wrote a novel for one of my daughters that was about animals and magic and adventure. And I thought, hey, I can actually do this. Well, I got another chance really soon because literally a year later, almost exactly to the day, I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. And so while I was in treatment, which was, I think 5 months really, and for the official part, I wrote another book. And I would sit there in the hospital, the chemo injection thing going and write. But it kept me sane and I loved it. And it was the start of how I got to where I am today.
Wow, wow. So how's your health now?
Oh, thank you for asking. It is good. I am 12 years cancer free.
That's excellent. And 12 years writing.
Yes, yeah.
And you shattered your pelvis. What? You were skiing down a mountain? What were you
I
doing?
was I was riding my horse and I was thrown onto the pavement.
Oh boy. Mm. Okay, those are so whole stories that we could tell, like lots of time exploring, but we're going to stay focused on on the book. So, for your audience, 'cause I know what the book is about, but maybe you could give our audience the premise.
Sure, would love to. So, Beautiful and Terrible Things, it's about a group of friends. They're very diverse, and they are all on the cusp of age 30. So, they're dealing with those sort of personal life questions about their careers and, marriage and kids, whether or not, what do they want. But they're also dealing with a lot of social justice issues that are plaguing the American city that they live in. So, that's sort of the background. And then the main character, Charlie, is a sort of damaged, superstitious woman who's suffered a lot, and she basically is drawn out of social isolation by this group of friends. And it's funny. It's actually been called, Amazon calls the book friendship fiction, which I didn't even know was a thing. But at its
Mm,
heart, it is a friendship story, and that seems to be what draws readers in the most.
I didn't even know that was a genre. Yes, friendship fiction. That is cool, and it lets you shine in that genre too. Yeah, that is excellent. So Charlie is, well, first of all, what inspired you to write this particular story? But did you have a close group of friends that you hung out with? What was the inspiration?
I did not have a group like this, and I wish I did. And but I was striving to create a group of characters that people would want to feel part of. I think of the TV show Friends, or for us older people, the movie The Big Chill, where you're just like,
Yes.
oh, those people get along so great and they're so fun. I want to be part of that. And to my great pleasure, a lot of reviewers have said that it reminded them of that kind of camaraderie. So that was one thing I wanted to create. But I also thought from the beginning, what is the age group going to be? And I went with millennials because I think they're often maligned unfairly. And yes, I have two daughters who are millennials, and they and their friends are not entitled, the stereotype at all. They're really passionate and they're engaged and they want to make the world better. So I wanted to show that. And then I had to choose what issue to sink my teeth into because I do love meaty topics, as I know you do. And and I couldn't decide which one to address, and so I decided to go for three. So this book gets into mental health, racism, and immigration, as well as touching on some other social ills. And most people seem to say that it's worked. I've had a couple of readers say that was too much, it was overwhelming, but for the most part, people say that's a really fair portrayal of life today. So that's how the book came to be.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with you. I didn't think, I mean, it was an emotional book, but it didn't overwhelm, I thought. I really thought that well, I like, as you know, I like books with issues, so maybe that's it. We're kindred spirits there. So
Right.
you mentioned Charlie, you mentioned some things about her. How would you describe, she's such a complex woman. How would you describe her? What do you love about her? What are some of her traits?
Sure. I think I mean, I love Charlie because first of all, anyone can relate to her. She does suffer from undiagnosed depression. And even if you're not that person, she has suffered in life. She dares to take a chance and she gets hopeful and then things come crashing down. So I think almost anybody can relate to that, being in a bad place and then feeling hope and then something goes wrong. But what I love about Charlie is she's taken her superstitions to an interesting level. So she has suffered loss, as I hinted at, and because of that, she's become quite superstitious. So, for example, she believes in a curse that every 7 years is going to either bring tragedy down on her or someone that she loves. And that's one reason she holes up in the bookstore in her apartment above the bookstore she manages because she doesn't dare to interact with life, basically. But she also, she'll look at an animal that she sees in the wild, out in the woods, if it might be a hawk in the sky or a deer by the side of the road, and she thinks they're sending her a message. She calls them her animal omens. So I love all those things about Charlie. And of course, I love that while she struggles a lot during the course of the book, she does ultimately triumph.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, she does overcome. Um, so I was curious, and I hope I hope you'll take this question in the spirit that it's offered. But when you're writing such diverse characters, um, you know, like me, I write about people that I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily part of their culture, or, how do you handle that? How do you make sure that you are sensitive
Mhm.
to the cultures of the characters that you are writing about and that it's authentic?
hmm No, I think that's a great question. And, we both know in our industry, there's a lot of debate about cultural appropriation, as they call it. And, is it fair for a book to be published that's by someone who is not like the characters they write? And I think that's a very valid point when you have that choice. I think the author who represents the story should be given preference. But at the same time, as writers, I mean, if all the characters in my book resembled me, that would be pretty boring. And if I wasn't able to imagine other personalities and as well as places and times, I wouldn't be very creative, would I? So there's that tension always. But what I decided going into this was, yeah, I was biting off a lot. I have, black characters and Filipino American characters and Colombian American characters and gay characters and bisexual and people suffering from mental health issues. And so I needed a lot of input, and I decided right up front that I was going to find it. I had to go beyond just the basic research that a lot of us authors can do quite easily on the internet. You know, you can read stories, you can read case studies, but I needed more than that. And so I tracked down what people now call sensitivity readers, and I had a lot of them to advise me on the mental health and the race issues and the immigration parts. And I even believe it or not, through another friend who's an author, found a Filipino artist to look at the parts about my Filipino American artist character. It was amazing.
That's cool. That is wonderful. That's a great way to do it and a way to expand our minds. We don't want things that limit us. We want, but as writers and as creatives, we want to have avenues that open up to us and let us be. So that was good. That was a really good, that was great. Um, you also have, so this, I'm so interested in this. So you wrote a shorter work that has some of the same characters in it. Tell us about that.
Yes. So what happened there was my first draft of Beautiful and Terrible Things was twice as long as what was published, because it is about six friends and all six of them had their own story arc, and then I once I finished the first draft, I was like, there's no way anyone's going to publish this unless you're Stephen King, or Barbara Kingsolver. You don't get to produce a book that long. So I had to take out a lot of the sub stories, so to speak, and one of them was this character Xander's coming out story. He's been out with his friends for ages, but he's never told his father that he's bisexual, and he really struggles with it. And so I thought, this actually works as his own story. And so it's essentially outtakes. I don't think
Mm.
they're bad scenes. I think they're good scenes, and it was the novelette has been recognized with some awards, so I guess it worked. So that's what I took. I took that story from Xander, put it into what's called a novelette, which is shorter than a novella, by the way, as I learned. And yeah, and it became the Wallace House of Pain, and it has, like I said, it's won two awards.
It's one, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, because we write more than can say in our book, and because we have the lives of our characters so full in our minds, that we can't put it all out in that novel. So how smart was that? That's excellent to pick that one up and see how Xander's doing and see that sounds really good. Are you working on something now?
I am. I have two fun projects going. Well, the first one, the writing was fun. Now I'm in that horrible stage that you'll know of trying to find a publisher. But that's for my next contemporary novel called The Unraveling of Caro Dunn. And then I'm also writing a true crime memoir with a friend for something completely different. It's her story, but I'm basically, writing it for her as she's not a writer. And that's a fascinating story that I'm sure will get a publisher when we're ready.
Oh, a true crime memoir
Mhm.
in someone else's story. Hmm. That is very interesting. Yeah. So, this is what are you reading? What are you
Mhm.
writing? Has there been an author or a book, authors who've had a really big impact on who you are as a writer?
Yes. So To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, I
Mm.
read as a kid and have read it numerous times since. And that book really, it stuck with me. And at the time, I couldn't even say why. But I think now it's because it, I empathized with so much of what was going on. I emphasized with Boo and with Scout and with her father. And that's, empathy is a huge part of being a writer. And I think I'm a fairly empathetic person. So that really resonated with me and stuck with me. So that had a big impact. And um, this is, I wish I could say I now write like this, but I don't. Toni Morrison. I mean, anything by her, but in particular, when I read Beloved, I just remember I read this passage. Wasn't even a full paragraph, I don't think. It was maybe a few sentences. And I stopped and I just went, whoa. And I backed up and I said, I have to read that again And I've never done that in a book, even though it's been many books I've loved the prose. But in this case, I just was like, the way that she put the words together was like music, you know. And then later she went and wrote jazz, but it was just, and it was stunning to me. And so that's something that I can't do, but I definitely aspire to.
I love beautiful sentences. When you see a sentence that just, my son is a writer as well. He's a short story writer.
Mhm.
And sometimes, even even if it's a story that I think he should work on some more, I like putting underline this sentence is so gorgeous, and I wish I could write gorgeous sentences because that's not, but I do aspire to that as well. And
Do
then
you
we
ever, do
love
you ever
to,
read, oh, Karen, do you ever read a book like, and then after you read a sentence and then you just go, thank you to the author. Thank you for giving us that sentence.
yes, exactly. That is, and they stay with you. They really stay with you. Yeah. Do you have anything that you've read recently that you could recommend to our audience with gorgeous
Um,
sentences or not?
right, right. Sure. Well, for various reasons, differing reasons. I mean, I like to dip into the classics sometimes. I was an English major in
Mm.
college, but there's still many classics I haven't read. So I read Jane Eyre for the first time. That was
Mm.
fun, very enjoyable. And I recently also read, this one's been around for a while, very popular, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. By
Yes, I
Yeah.
love that book.
Yes, and a bunch of people had told me that my character Charlie in Beautiful and Terrible Things reminded them a bit of Eleanor, where she was sort of she Charlie's not prickly, but she's definitely isolated like Eleanor, and then she kind of gets lured out of that by a new friend. And so people had compared them, and I had never read the
Yeah,
book, so now I have.
yeah, that's good. That didn't jump into my mind, having read both books, but now that you say that,
Mhm.
that makes sense to me. Those are two great recommendations. So now everybody wants to read your books and they want to be able to find you. Tell our audience how they can find you.
Sure, I would love to. So the books are available the usual places. I recommend if bookshop.org, which is a website similar to Amazon, but anything you buy supports a local independent bookstore of your choice. So that's a really
Mm.
nice option. They don't always have all formats of books, just as a warning, but if you can buy from them, that's great. But also, Beautiful and Terrible Things and my other books are on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, the usual suspects. Yeah.
And your website?
Yes. So my website is authorsmstevens.com, and that's Stevens with a V. And from there, you can subscribe if you want some free bonus materials related to the book. You can get to any of my social media accounts. And you can also contact me. So I know some of your viewers are book club fans. I love book
Mm.
clubs. And if anybody would like me to participate in their book club, for a debrief session, I would love that. And you can contact me via the website.
And I would just say to all of you, there's so much to this story that it's perfect for book clubs because there's so much for a group discussion to dig into, and we all have opinions about mental health, and we all have opinions about all the things that the friends are facing. So I do highly recommend that you get in touch with Sue. When you do get in touch with her, please tell her that you met her on what are you reading, what are you writing. Sue and I thank you all for watching and listening, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Bye.